Hello, my name is Daniel Brace. I'm from I2 product support team in Cambridge, UK, and I'll be taking you today through a few new features which we have added to I2 Analyst Notebook at version 9.2.1 in conjunction with I2 EIA 2.3.1. The two features which I'll be taking you through today are record identifiers and source references. First of all, I'll take you through record identifiers because those are the simpler of the two to discuss. First thing to note is that I am currently signed in as my user in my information store. So if I drag a person onto my information store aligned chart surface, you will see that currently I get, as I have it open on the details view in my record inspector, a new identifier generated. So this is a new feature which we've added at this release, which allows analysts to easily search for specific records. So for example, you may have several John Smiths in your database and you might want to send a specific John Smith over to one of your colleagues to search for. Well, rather than having your colleague have to do a very specific visual query using perhaps their passport number or their date of birth combined with a bunch of other stuff, now you can simply send them this record identifier, which will allow them, once it's been uploaded to the information store, to quickly find using quick search this specific record. At this point, currently, if I were to pass this record identifier to one of my colleagues and have them search for it in quick search, it will not find them. The reason for that currently is because I haven't uploaded this record to the information store yet. Once I do upload it to the information store, they should be found very quickly, and we can test that now. So we're going to call this man David Bad Guy, and he's 34 years old. We're not going to add too much information to this person. We are simply going to upload that record at this point. Okay, David Bad Guy now exists in our information store. So at this point, we can now take his record identifier. We can do a quick search, enter that into our quick search box, and when we search for it, we find the specific David Bad Guy. You'll also notice one of the things which we now have as well is the ability to search for exact matches. This obviously is going to help tremendously when searching for very specific things, but if you turn on an exact match and compare it with an identifier, because it is a very unique string, it's always going to find only a single record. That's the first feature which we've added to the product. The next feature I'm going to take you through are source references. So, source references are a way of identifying where a piece of information has come from. So in an organization, you may have various different parts of intelligence that come into you, and you may gather these through online acquisitions of data, you may gather them in through human informants, you may gather them in from all sorts of sources. So the way that we have now developed of making sure that you can keep track of this information is a source reference. So to use source references, you can either import them using our ingestion, and this will be covered in our documentation online, or alternatively you can do it in the record inspector in Analyst Notebook Premium. So here I'm going to click New in the source references section, which is found under the details tab, which is the same place where your identifier was just now. If I click New, I can then add various information. So the first thing to add is my source name. In this instance, I'm going to pick that my source name is a human informant called Billy the Whistle. So he's a human informant. And now we get to the first of the few interesting fields. So location is where physically the information about this source can be found. This can either be a digital file link, or alternatively, it can be a physical location. If you do make it a digital file link, then when this is then added to the information store, you will then be able to have your analysts click on that and it will open. So for example, if it was a web page and I entered www.google.com, it would then enter that and be able to be clicked on when it was brought back at a later date. So let's give that a go now. So if I click OK, then you can see that this has turned into a hyperlink. When I click it, it opens Google. Fairly self-explanatory. You can also, if I show you quickly another feature, you can edit your source references once you have done them, as I hadn't actually finished that one yet. So if I do that, I can click Edit, and you may have also seen in the drop-down you can also delete source references. These locations do not have to be to web locations. You could obviously type free text in here, so I might say it's in file 32-B draw 7 if it was physically in a physical file location, and that will save just fine as well. Or alternatively, I could pass it a path to a file on my machine or on a local network drive. As long as I pass this to Analyst Notebook Premium in a way which is a URL accepted path, that will also be clickable. What I mean by this is, for example, if I wanted to enter a path to a file I have on my machine, I might enter something that looks like this. And then if I were to save that, this would also be a clickable link, which would open up my file on Billy the Whistle. The other fields which are left in the editing of source references are an image URL. So, like above, if I have a link to a URL I want to be appearing in my source reference, which is something where people can physically and very quickly distinguish between different source reference types, then I simply need to enter it here. Again, this is just an image URL which can be online, or in the same vein as before, it could be a link to a file. So in this instance, if I open up Google and I grab myself a link to a mugshot and I paste it in here, when I save this source reference, you'll see that first of all I get a preview of what I'm going to find, and this should be basically if any web page should be able to load this file type, I believe that it should also then display that file type easily in Analyst Notebook Premium. And that will also then, when I save it, appear in the record inspector as well. So finally, the final field is a description, which is just a description of the source. So in this instance, I'm going to say, Billy the Whistle interviewed with us and confirmed that David Bad Guy is not a good dude, and click OK. That then leaves me with my new source reference, which has a link I can click on, an image which is pulled from the internet, and all I need to do at that point is upload my changes. The last thing to mention about source references is that you can also set some of this information when you import into Analyst Notebook. So if I open one of my saved specifications, you'll see I have one here called import source references. If I open up this specification to have a look, and once it loads, jumps to the last section called import details, you'll see that we also have a section here about source references for on my imported records. So, like we had before, we've got source name, source type, location, and description. The only one missing here is image URL, which is currently not supported at this release. You'll note that source name and source type are basically identical, free text fields for us to enter whatever we like as before, as is description, but we have a few different options for location. For location, we can choose our source reference to be the file name or the folder and the file name of the file which we're importing, which might be useful if you want your source reference to just be the file that you imported this data from. However, you can still use a specified value, and you can still use the same URL acceptable form before to be able to import a value. So if we do that now, it'll come to the chart surface. Now if we look at that using the record inspector, once again we have the location in the appropriate format and an identifier generated, which obviously won't happen yet until we upload it to the information store as mentioned previously. And if we click on the location, it will once again open up Billy the Whistle's file. That's everything which I've got to show for you today. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and we hope this helps you in the future.